This was the headline yesterday or over the weekend from CNBC. These are America's 10 weakest state economies most at risk in a recession. And unfortunately, one of our two states ended up on that list. Kansas comes in at number 3. Scott Cohn is here, journalist with CNBC, joining us on KCMO in Kansas City. Scott, good morning. It's great to have you here. Why did Kansas end up number 3 on this list?
We looked at various different factors in the economy. This is part of our annual America's Top States for Business study. And Kansas comes in 33 overall in those rankings, which go over 10 categories of competitiveness. In the economy category, it's weak growth. A lot of it has to do with the rural economy, the concerns about what's going to happen with tariffs and the like. Although Kansas is relatively insulated from all of that, it does have somewhat of a high exposure to China in terms of world trade. It just really was more than anything else, relatively weak economic growth, not the greatest housing market, the various different factors that we look at in the economy category. And when we ranked all 50 states for overall competitiveness, we start with 10 categories, and this year economy is the heaviest weighted because that's the issue that states are talking about as they market themselves. They all claim that we've got a great economy, our economy is growing, we have a lot of great corporations located here, of which Kansas does not, and so we measure states against that. That was the heaviest weighted category in this year's study.
So I was looking at your rankings here, and I see that the state of Kansas right now is ranked 8th in business friendliness, but the economy is ranked 48th. So how is there such a discrepancy in those two categories?
Well, they're two very different things. I mean, the economy is economic performance, it's growth, it's job growth, and things like that. Business friendliness, we look at just the regulatory scheme, the legal climate, just how much bureaucracy there is from state to state, and so Kansas does well in that regard. But that doesn't necessarily always translate to better economic performance.
Yeah, no, that's fair. I mean, I look at some of the states that are at the top of business friendliness, and it's the Dakotas, it's Tennessee, it's North Carolina, it's Indiana, and overall, they're in a much better place than Kansas is. So how would you suggest, based on these rankings, Kansas leverage its friendly business climate to basically having a more diverse and robust economy, which, according to the rankings, it's lacking in right now?
Well, I'm not one to give advice, and I get asked that a lot. How can we do better? I mean, I think that the performance kind of speaks for itself. I think business friendliness is an important foundation to developing an overall great business climate. There are a lot of issues that Kansas is facing, again, with the agricultural economy being sluggish, there just being a lot of concern out there about what's going on in that regard that may be a little bit beyond the state's control. Anything that you can do to attract business, to obviously reducing some of those speed bumps in terms of the regulatory environment are important, but there are other things as well, things like quality of life, the workforce, areas where Kansas could have done better, like technology and innovation. And again, that's something where we're looking at federal research dollars oftentimes, but that's different this year because a lot of those are being cut back. And so there are issues that a lot of states are dealing with this year in a really unusual year with a lot of things changing that may be a little bit beyond your control.
Yeah, now I see what you're saying there. Now, Scott Cohn is here with us, CNBC. Now, what's interesting is yesterday, Scott, the Panasonic plant opened up the largest EV battery plant in the U.S. right here in DeSoto, Kansas, which is part of the Kansas City metro. And they've got 1,000 workers right now. They say they'll have 4,000 by the time they're fully operational in 2027. Is that the kind of project, even though, there's a lot of subsidies involved, which is obviously controversial, is that the kind of stuff that you perceive as being helpful to a state, or does it depend on how they get that plant here based on the subsidies involved?
Well, I don't know if it's quite that simple. I mean, that is something that's certainly a feather in the cap for the economic development people in Kansas to have a plant like that and have growing jobs. And so we do look at that when we're looking at state economies, but we're also looking at a category that we call cost of doing business. So if there are incentives, that might count in the state's favor. But at the same time, back to the economy category, we look at the state's fiscal health. So Kansas does, I think, reasonably well in that regard in terms of, you have a good balance of expenses and revenues and the like. And Kansas actually performs fairly well in that metric. So it all sort of works out. Yeah, you got this plant. What did it cost the state in terms of fiscal health, in terms of education? And Kansas does well on education. And what did the incentives do to the cost of doing business? Did they help? Did they bring down the cost for this employer and others? That counts in your favor. But what did it take away from? And that we see in other areas, infrastructure and quality of life and things like that.
All right, Scott, what about the Missouri side? I saw that overall Missouri was ranked 34th. So Kansas and Missouri are right next to each other when it comes to America's top states for business per CNBC. And where Missouri appears to do a good job is the cost of doing business in the state. They're top 6 in the country, but they've got the third worst workforce in America in Missouri. So how should Missouri as a state read into that?
Right, and workforce is another important category. It's getting a little bit less so as hiring slows and as artificial intelligence starts to take over and things like that. But the biggest issue that Missouri faces with its workforce is people are not coming to the state. The state is not attracting. We look at migration of adults over 25 with bachelor's degree or higher, and Missouri does poorly with that. Missouri is 47th in that metric. It's not bringing the people into the state, and that's important. You have to have the people in order to have a great workforce. It's a reasonably well-educated workforce. It does attract people in some regards, but in terms of that key metric of educated workers, you're not bringing the people in. There's also a little bit of still a worker shortage in Missouri, which is a little bit of a paradox there, but that's also a bit of an issue. So it's really, when we look at a state's workforce, we're looking at really the availability of good educated workers, and by educated I mean not necessarily technology, but also people with career education, with occupational training, certificates, and things like that. Missouri does not do particularly well on either of those fronts.
It's very interesting. Looking at the top of your list here, America's top states for business in 2025, North Carolina's 1, Texas 2, Florida 3, Virginia 4, Ohio is 5. What is the common thread, the common theme? I mean, some are going to immediately look at, I guess you would say, the shading politically of these states, but broader than that, because I know it's more than that, what do these states have in common that states like Kansas and Missouri should be trying to copy?
Well, one thing that they all have in common is really outstanding economies. North Carolina, Florida, and Texas are the number 1, 2, and 3 economies. Florida number 1, Texas number 2, North Carolina number 3 in our estimation, and so that helps. Virginia was always at or near the top for the last several years. It slips to number 4 because it is so closely tied to all the decisions made across the Potomac in terms of the federal budget. They have a huge federal workforce, and that workforce obviously is in jeopardy with all that's going on. And so they slip to number 4, but still kind of in the elite. And Ohio's strength is its infrastructure. Ohio is so centrally located, millions of people within a day's drive, very strong infrastructure, and also things like the power grid that we look at that have become so much more important. Computing power. Ohio does really well as far as that goes, and also not a bad economy. So as I said, economy was something that we looked at very closely this year because that's what the states are talking about, and all of these top states for business are doing really well on that front.
Wow, that's really interesting. Scott Cohn, CNBC, thank you for sharing the insights on this list that you all put together. It's well done, and we appreciate your time.
Well, thank you very much for your interest.
You bet. That's Scott Cohn with CNBC.